Well, hello and welcome. Come on in. It's Friday, June 5th, 2020, and it is great to be with you as always. Welcome in. Uh, have a seat. Say hello. Tell me, where are you? Where are you at today? Are you home? I guess you're probably home. Still not traveling quite yet. Let me know that you're here and where you are. Where is home for you? How are things? Hi, Carolyn. Good to see you. Rachel Kraft. Hello. Angie Coley's in the house. Alan, how are you? Good to see you. Bill, Mr. Alonzo, Camille. Good to see you. Cheryl, Greg, James. Hey, James. Jim Leach. Hello, John. Just John. Mike Lucas is here. Hi, Mary. The great Mary Barbie in the house. Pile in, everybody. It's good to see you. I'm looking forward to this talk today. Shelly from California. Hey, Jim. In art studio in Stonington, Connecticut. It's a great creative space. That sounds great. An art studio. Very nice. Hey, Arnold. Good to see you, my man. How are you? Arthur's from South Africa. Wow. Good to see you, Arthur. Is it your first Chief Chat, or have you been with us before? Hey, Alan in Massachusetts. What's up? I was born in Lowell, Massachusetts, if we haven't discussed that. Alan, that's my home. Yeah. Reno, Ron from Reno. Ron, what's up over there in John Carlton country? Dallas. Hello, Sid. Mike is also in Dallas. Awesome. So, excited to be with you guys today. And if it's okay with you, I would love to hear from a lot of you today. We don't have a hot seat today on the Chief Chat. Nobody signed up to jump into the hot seat and have a copy critiqued or anything. So I will open that up to you. If you have a pressing issue in your business that you'd like to discuss, then that seat is available. And if you want to post in the Q&A that anything you'd like to ask me, or maybe we'll put together a little panel like we like to do here in the Chief Chats and help you out with anything you're struggling with. That's what we do here in Copy Chief. With that, let's dive in. I want to talk about, hi, Serbia. Cool. It's so great to have an international community here. One of the things I'm most excited about with Copy Chief is that it is a diverse culture. I'd always welcome even more diversity, but we do have people from all over the world in Copy Chief, and it's very interesting to get different perspectives. So let's talk about a little bit about what's happening in the world, because I'm sure it's on everybody's mind. And I don't want to call it conflicted, but in one respect, I want to give everybody, I want to remember why we're here and why you guys joined Copy Chief. And I never want to sort of like confuse the platform, right? One of the things about Copy Chief that is so organic. I didn't create it this way on purpose. It's just, places have a certain vibe. And I always want to think that it's clear to any member of Copy Chief that it's an inclusive place where everybody's welcome. And we just know that we have all kinds of different viewpoints, just from where we live geographically to our political leanings to all kinds of things. But I love that those things don't often get discussed in Copy Chief, not because it's not super important to discuss those things, but because I like to think that they don't come up that often, because it's assumed that Copy Chief members feel a certain way about human beings, and that we're respectful, and that we're inclusive, and that we're, and that doesn't mean that we're a liberal or conservative or any other label that people so conveniently want to put on things. It just means that we're people who like other people and champion other people. And that's the spirit of the place, right? I'm at once eager to explore the topics of race and understand your perspective and give you a voice to be heard and how you're processing some of the things you're dealing with that everybody's watching unfold. And I'm sure having a lot of emotion about, I know I am. And at the same time, wanting to remind us that this is a place where we come to stay focused on how to help our business grow our business. However, those two things aren't conveniently separated in this case, just the way they weren't with coronavirus. And hey, coronavirus is still happening. Can you believe it? Who knew? I know it's just, this whole year so far, man. So there are certain times when things are happening socially that they're absolutely critical to how we conduct ourselves in our business. And if I can provide a platform where we can explore those things and express them and come away better or more educated, then I feel like that's a great service we can all help each other provide for one another, right? So I'm not gonna. My purpose today is to not make this a town hall about all the complex issues facing our country right now and here in America, because I think it's on one hand, it's super important that we do speak up and we do have things to say. And I want to make everybody here know that this is a platform where I welcome your input. But at the same time, I feel like my overriding thought this week has been that, man, it's like too early for a lot of people to suddenly know exactly where they stand on a lot of these issues. Let's be honest that if race relations is not something you wake up and deal with every day, like we're being reminded so many people do. But if that's not a conflict that you're faced with daily and you haven't had to put energy towards understanding where you stand on it, I don't believe, like a lot of people say, that it's your obligation to suddenly have a well-formed opinion and be able to articulate your feelings about all this, right? Yes, it sucks that we're all getting caught flat-footed in this. And so, but I feel like it's equally unproductive that a lot of people are sort of shaming other people for not knowing exactly how to speak up about some of the things we're dealing with. So, I think it'd be cool today. I want to do like some best things, and I really do want to hear from a lot of you, but maybe it'd be interesting if you guys welcome it, to have it change it just a little bit. Instead of saying the best thing I've learned, this week or recently, it's like maybe the most important thing I've realized in all this, or the thing that seems obvious to me from where I stand, right? Folks in other countries, what does this look like from over there? How surprised are you that this is happening? Or what's one little thing that you're sure is going to change for you going forward? And how might that affect your business? How might that show up in your business dealings? So if you welcome that, is everybody okay with that? Please give me a yes or yeah. Okay, good. I just want to, again, I don't want to sort of force this upon us, but it's here and we have to talk about it. And man, I really respect all of I know you're intelligent, thinking, caring human beings, and that's all the label we need to have a good discussion, right? So, okay, good. I'm glad you welcome this. I really want to hear from you. So I'll start. And by the way, just because I don't want it to get lost in in this bigger conversation, I am excited about our training coming up on June 10th with Rachel Kraft, who I know is here, and it's about lead magnets. And I think it's significant that a lead magnet at its core is the thing that your one best chance at putting across who you are to a brand new friend, a brand new person, right? We think of these as like business transactions. A lead magnet, okay, an optimized lead magnet will produce this, should produce this amount of conversion, and you know, we can look at just the numbers. But if we think about, you know, it as a document, as a conversation where you're giving value, and your goal with a good lead magnet should be to make a connection, right? To create some kind of bond. And that means talking about who you are, what you're for, some of what you're not for or against, in really just like a 60-second sales hook would, like defining in a compact, valuable piece of content who you are, what you stand for, and how you want to help empower the person receiving it, right? And I think it's perfectly appropriate that that's going to be our focus as we do the training with Rachel, and then we go into the workshop of working on our own lead magnets, or a way to build lead magnets that we might do for our clients. I just think it's great, and like super meaningful that's where we'll be putting our focus. Okay, so keep in mind, if you don't have it knocked down, of course, if you're a Copy Chief member, you will be getting reminders. But it's June 10th at 3 p.m. and I'm really excited to invite Rachel on to train us for the first time. She's done an amazing job fortifying her bat signal with lead magnets, and this is what she's great at. This is what she decided she loved to do, and since she's embraced that, it's amazing how her business has taken off, and her passion for how to do these well is driving all of that. So be sure to mark your calendars for June 10th at 3 o'clock. If you're not yet a member of Copy Chief and you'd love to be part of that training and everything else we do here, it's copychief.com/join. So I want to start this conversation. And by the way, do me a favor, just like put it, okay, we got some in the Q&A here. Just want to check out what you're saying. Cool. Yeah. Hi, Sid wants to talk about e-commerce. Okay, cool. Yep. Okay, cool. Claudio and okay, cool. Ron. Awesome. We'll get to those. If you have a thing you want to share, a lesson, an insight, an observation, please raise your hand so I know that you want to come on camera with me and have a chat about it. And then we'll do it. There's Angie. Anybody else, just raise your hand. And don't be shy. Like, again, you don't need to be perfect in any of this. So I want to start with that. I was writing about this in an email that's going to go out Sunday. That, man, it's cool if it's clunky, right? I think, man, we've got to allow these difficult conversations to be clunky, because the worst thing is not being willing to have them because they're uncomfortable, because they're clunky, right? So that's been one of my lessons in this week, has been just remembering that we're human and we're not perfect, and we don't have to be told or believe or feel that a single statement or just being vulnerable enough to have a clunky conversation or be less than articulate on a topic defines where we stand on that topic, right? I think a willingness to have a dialogue, to take part in a conversation, is the most powerful thing. Let me rephrase that, is about the most powerful statement you can make about your intention to help and to be a positive force for change, right? So one thing I say a lot is that I plus C equals S, which is intent plus communication equals a solution. That as a freelancer, as a business owner, as a human being, if you have the right intention and you're sure about your intention for how to solve a thing, or why you want to create a certain outcome, and you communicate clearly your intention, no matter how long that takes or how many facets there are to that, then you will get a good solution eventually. It may not be right away. So for instance, if you're like in a difficult negotiation or situation with a business partner or a friend or whatever, and you may know that your intention is to have to put a thing down for a minute, right? And you know that the person on the other side is not gonna, they don't want to hear that. They're gonna be mad, they're gonna be disappointed, right? They're gonna be surprised maybe, but you know in your heart and from your experience that not going through with the thing you talked about doing is the best outcome. Like that's really the only good solution for both you and you believe for the other party, right? And so you go to them and you say, look, here's the deal. Let me clearly communicate why I feel like this is what why we need to not do this. And you have to allow that they're going to have their response to it and they're going to have their reaction to it. And that's theirs. It's not your job to cause them to not have that reaction. It's not your duty to immediately make them feel better about it, because that's really probably just you wanting you to feel better about it, right? So, but the gut check I do on this is, can I imagine that even if they don't like the conversation and the outcome I'm proposing, will they maybe down the road a piece look back and realize, okay, I didn't like it at the time. I still might not agree 100% with why they made that decision, but I understand, I can see clearly Kevin's intentions for that, right? I know where his heart was and I get his logic behind why he felt that was the only decision. Then I'm comfortable having the conversation, okay? Because sometimes, and guess what? It might not happen. They might never agree with you. You might lose a friend. You might lose an associate, you know? But if your intent is pure, meaning you've done the introspection, you've played out the scenario, you've considered all the consequences, and you clearly communicate why you think that's important, then you can accept their response, because that's your only choice, is to accept their response. But at least you can be hopeful that your intentions will have been clear, right? So intent plus communication equals solutions. I want to add one to that when it comes to the kind of context we're in right now, when we're thinking about race and we're thinking about super complex issues. And we're seeing now that these protests, which are so beautiful in some ways, are so horrible and fear inspiring and violent in other ways. Oh my God, some of the videos I've seen, what's happening at some of these. And then you realize that there are outside forces manipulating some of those situations. And again, like, how could anybody know the full spectrum of how all this is going down? We're just learning, some of us, about these extremist groups and how they operate and what their agenda is, right? So there's a lot to this, but I think we need to add a thing into the formula. Intent plus vulnerability plus communication can hopefully, maybe it equals, maybe not an immediate solution, but understanding, awareness, action. And that vulnerability piece is important, because I think everybody feels pretty vulnerable right now in the context of all this. Wanting to understand it and, most of us, at least in our personal private lives, we're having difficult uh, conversations about all this. But the more of those conversations we have, the less difficult they get and the more enlightened we become, So I want to say that, for me, I guess my big takeaway in all this so far has been that if something's important to us at one time, we have to make sure that we keep up making it an important thing and not conveniently letting it go because it's not convenient for us to stay up on or stay involved with, or maybe we've lost our initial seed of motivation, or we just got distracted by life and business and other things. So an example is, I'm old enough to remember very clearly the consequences of the Rodney King trial and the acquittal of those cops in 1992 and what that did to American society and the horror that played out in many of those violent scenes that followed, in Los Angeles being burned to the ground and all that stuff. And to me personally, race has always been something I care about. Equality is something I've always instinctively cared about. I traveled a lot in the South as a young comic, and I was startled, shocked often at some of the conversations I would hear from club owners, just stuff that really, when sometimes you hear that people have a certain experience and you can only assume that they're exaggerating because you've never seen anything like it in your life. I came face to face with several scenarios like that in situations traveling the South. And this is not just to label the South as the problem. There's towns all over the world and all over this country that have worse problems with race than the South does. But that was my experience, and certainly it's prevalent there in a lot of ways. And it is very startling and eye-opening when you come face to face and you feel scared and vulnerable for your own life because you're challenging someone on an issue where their hatred and their belief in their ideal about it is so entrenched, so a part of their DNA, that they are thrilled to put it on you and scare you about it and be bold about it and say shocking things, right? There's no political, no societal politeness about it. One instance, I was in the back office of a comedy club getting paid by a club owner who had a loaded gun on his desk as he was counting out the money to pay me and the other comic. And he just started saying some horrible things. And I challenged him back in my way, the little knowledge I had on the topic at the time. And the things he said back to me were I won't repeat them. But the other comic, as we were headed back to the hotel, chided me. He said, what are you doing? You realize we're in this small town and we're at basically the only hotel in town, and that guy's paying for the room and he knows where we are. And why would you speak up in that moment? You could get us killed or whatever. And you don't sometimes think about the logic of things when you're really feeling that moment. And it's important to remember that we cannot put ourselves in other people's shoes when they feel victimized, when they feel threatened, when they're scared, when they feel super vulnerable, and to say that you should behave a certain way or to not behave a certain way must mean you're guilty. Man, that's so ignorant. That just means that you haven't been in scenarios where you're really scared for your life and very unsure of what's about to happen next. Somebody who's been in a scenario like that would not say, if you behave this way, then you must have been guilty or you must have been doing something wrong. That's just ignorance. That's ignorance. And so the way to combat ignorance, step one, is to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and think about times where we have felt that way. There's probably a few times in all of our lives, to some degree, where we felt scared and vulnerable, maybe as little kids, maybe as adults. Or what is it like to walk into a room of strangers, or to feel like you're not prepared for a social situation, or all kinds? Just think about it. Just take a minute to come in contact with that. So after 1992, I wanted to get more educated, and so I started reading books from like Michael Eric Dyce, in things like that. And I read Thurgood Marshall's biography, and I was educating myself about it. And then, because like all things, I'm not going to say it was like a New Year's resolution that I didn't follow through on, but it was, I feel now like, man, I wish I'd have kept up, and I wish I'd have like really stayed in the conversation more. I'd feel so much more aware of the shit that's happening now if I'd have done that. And so that's my vow, is that if this is important to me, or if any issue is important to me, I'm not going to let it only be important when it's happening. I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to keep educating myself, and I'm going to keep having difficult conversations so that I don't catch myself flat-footed when some shit goes down that is catching the whole world off guard. Okay. That's my takeaway from this, is that, and by the way, this has come up one other time in Copy Chief. No, Ron, I haven't read Black Like Me, and that looks like a good suggestion. So I'm very open to anybody's suggestions on books that made a big impact on them. I've just ordered Michael Eric Dyce's new book. It's this sermon to, about basically talking to white people about racism and helping us have context on what it looks like and feels like. You read it back in the 70s. Yeah. There's a lot of great books, a lot of great resources. And I've seen a lot of people sharing a lot of great resources. My friend Adrienne Dorson sent out an email to her list that had a list of a lot of good resources. So that's my big take in it, is that, man, we have to be vulnerable, and we have to allow these conversations to happen. And so, again, being conscious of why you're here and why anybody signs up to my list as a business, but also not respecting their intention to show up and learn about copy and marketing, to shield or deflect the fact that important conversations need to happen. And so the last time I had conversations like this, I did a couple of podcast episodes. One of them just happened sort of organically. I'll show you here. Hold on, giveaway Zoom thing. So you guys probably know about Doberman Dan. He's a great copywriter, a great leader in our industry, super smart, cool guy. And I was interviewing Dan. I don't remember the exact date of this. This is probably 3 years ago, on Truth About Marketing. And I knew Dan was a former cop. And this was a time when police brutality was in the news very much. And we were seeing, again, what seems now like an endless pattern of these incidents. And in talking to Dan, I just was curious to get his take on it as a former cop, a guy who spent 12 years with a gun on his hip and a badge on his chest. And that was his job for 12 years. And now is clearly like an empathetic, smart human being. His wife is African-American, or she's a person of color, at least. And so I asked Dan on the podcast about police brutality and why he thinks that happens. And it's a really interesting discussion. So if you're interested in hearing that, I think it'll be enlightening, because we talk about not the politics of it or anything else, but the psychology. It's exactly at the 10-minute mark to the 19-minute mark. It's conveniently almost exactly those timestamps, a 9-minute conversation about why he thinks police brutality happens, and if there is a racist element to it, and those kinds of things. It's really insightful. And then I also allowed myself to be vulnerable, which I try to do as much as possible. I like being the new guy at something. I really want to always embrace sucking at something. And sometimes that includes having conversations that you know that you're wish you could speak more articulately about. One of our members, Max Rousier, who I don't know if anybody still keeps in touch with Max. You guys, for those of you who've been around a while and remember Max, he was such a great guy. I don't know where he is. I tried looking him up on Instagram and Facebook and places and can't seem to find him. But he had started a thread inside of Copy Chief about racism in the industry. And so I had him on the podcast and to just talk about it. Simple, stupid things like, how should white people refer to their black friend or a black person? Is it okay to say this, when you're talking about them, is it okay to say, yeah, he's a black, is there a relevance to saying, does it matter that, or is it more appropriate to say African-American? And, stupid stuff like, it seems stupid, but it's not. It's like, again, what the intention is to just know how to speak so that you don't sound accidentally racist or ignorant or, you know what I mean, out of touch. Because I think for people, let's just say it, white people mostly, who don't really have the issue of how do you explain another white person, or what's the appropriate terms to describe. We don't have that shit in our lives. That's part of the privilege that they talk about, right? Is we don't have to deal with that. And so, but that doesn't mean we don't want to do better, that we don't want our intentions known when we speak. So we had, and at times, awkward conversation. It's like, it was my first time talking to Max on that level. I didn't even know how to pronounce his last name properly. I'm embarrassed by that, stuff that I learned from and hopefully have gotten better at. But we had a great conversation about all kinds of things. One of the things that came up on that podcast was this idea of silence is compliance. And what does that mean for the victims, for the people who say, if you call yourself a leader, you are obligated to speak up about issues that you should know are affecting us, because we've given you respect as someone who leads us in a thing like copywriting or marketing or our business. And when you don't make your feelings known about a topic that should so obviously be affecting us in a deep way, it hurts us to not hear from you or know where you stand. And that's heavy. Like, I hadn't considered that, because if you know me or follow me on, like, I don't get into politics, and I don't, the reason I don't is because, again, man, like, I just feel like on social media, it's such a hotbed and so often a cesspool. And I see these flame wars play out. And I think I don't see enough instances of people coming away better or more educated. It just quickly devolves into this ridiculous, frustrating argument of shaming and slamming. And you know what I mean? So I want to preserve my mental space for helping us do what I promised I'd help us do, which is be better marketers, be better copywriters, think about how to express our ideas. So it's a personal choice of mine to not speak up about those things, but to find out that might be hurtful for me not to speak up was really eye-opening to me. And so we discussed that at length. And by the way, the other person on the show was, at the time when I started Copy Chief Radio, was Jonathan Rivera, I was doing it through his company, and he would co-host the show a little bit with me, and he was on the call as well, and he completely rejected the notion that he was obligated to speak up about things in any way whatsoever, right? Which I also understood. And so I think you'll find, if you're interested, those conversations interesting. And again, I'm happy to admit that put it this way, and this is, again, just a full circle on my point of I need to personally do more and practice more having conversations that I hope will enlighten me and make me the person I want to become. Because if I'd had 10 or more conversations with people like Max about the topics we talked about, I would be so much better at having those conversations. I'd be so much better educated about these topics and things that matter to me. But I didn't. And there's not a nefarious reason behind that. It just, other things come up and you get super busy, and it's a bit of a scramble every day to keep up with all the stuff you're doing. But so my personal lesson in this is to make time to do the things and have the conversations that I think can contribute and help. So, yep. Yeah. Jonathan Rivera. Is that what I said? Did I say a different name? So anyway, okay. Okay, Angie, I'm going to welcome you on. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, anybody else, please raise your hand. I would love to have you come on and share with us. And, again, it can be the super simple, like the one thing I've realized in this, the one thing that I found the most surprising, whatever it is, let's let it be simple as you want. And I just want to hear more voices. Hi, Angie.
Hi. So, yeah, it's good to see everybody. And this is definitely a hard topic. And that's, I sometimes feel like I'm a camera hog on these things, but I just love sharing
You
these
have a lot to
takeaways.
say, and I'm glad you're comfortable doing it here.
And I wanted to all right. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Angie. And in the last 5 years, I have really dedicated my life to being open and honest about exactly who I am. And that means that I make people very uncomfortable when I openly admit to being a victim of domestic abuse and working hard to ending that, to being a victim of sexual assault, to being I grew up in South Texas. I grew up pretty damn ignorant. Like, sometimes it's just a product of your environment. And it was a long, hard journey for me to get to a place of empathy as a place of default. And sometimes it's actually overwhelming because, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I almost feel like I've gotten too good at being empathetic, because sometimes I have to shut down and not feel other people's emotions for a while because it's just too much. And I mentioned it in the comments when I was talking to David, that part of my first step toward empathy and understanding people was to remove the need to file something into right or wrong, true or false, because when your gut instinct is to dismiss something outright, you're not even giving yourself the possibility to consider another perspective. And there's this thing that we do, especially creative people, where we have these, tell me if this is you or not, where we have these incredibly long, complex arguments in our heads with ourselves, where we're winning all the arguments, especially if you're in the shower and it's an angry fight and you just want to be right. And you're imagining all the steps, that all of the little arguments and how they'll reply and what you'll say in return. And eventually it winds up with, I'm right and you're wrong and everybody's happy. And that's not the way it works, right? I remember when I first got involved with a man I later had to leave because of the abuse. And the first time we had a really big fight, I was talking like this to one of my friends at the time. And I'm telling her, like, I just wish that I could say this. And then he'd say that. And then I'd say this. And she looked at me and she said, Angie, you're never going to make him dance the way you want to. And that just hit me like a punch in the gut. Like, I could argue myself around in circles, but he's not going to hear it the way I want him to. That's why I thought it was so important that you started with talking about intent plus communication. If you're having your conversation in here, if you're having your conversation with you and your keyboard and looking up facts to prove other people wrong, you've already entered that dismiss,
Hmm.
true, false conundrum, and you're nowhere near feeling empathy. So if you're wondering if this is you, like if your friends are secretly sitting there going, God, that person just doesn't understand, maybe try a little mental exercise. And this is a good exercise for all of us, whether you're wondering where you are in this difficult conversational time or not. Ask yourself, what if it were true? Just go ahead and remove that need to dismiss something outright.
Hmm.
And then to move into true empathy, ask yourself, what if it was me? So, having a hard time not tearing up right now.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say how I would react like that because I don't even like considering what it would mean to me and my family if it was me. I can't judge anybody for reacting the way that they react, because if somebody did something like what happened to George Floyd to a member of my family, I can't guarantee I wouldn't be out trying to burn everything down too.
Right.
Emotion and grief is something that you can't put into a nice, neat little box, and it doesn't behave the way you want it to, no matter how hard you try. So if you find yourself just constantly frustrated by seeing what's going on and you want to understand your friends a little better, try this exercise of asking yourself, what if it was me? Or starting with, what if it was true and what if it was me?
Mm. That's beautiful. That's so important. Angie, and I hope you don't mind me uh, adding this because it's about you. But something we all have to do is, if we're dedicated to making something better, we got to show up places. We got to show up places.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you started volunteering recently on a hotline for abused women.
Yeah.
What has it done to your level of empathy and understanding to do that in ways that you might not have expected?
That it taught me the importance of self-care, because you can't give to the point that you don't have anything left for yourself. If you to use a cliche, you can't feed somebody from an empty cupboard. You have to make sure that you are refilling. And the hardest lesson of all for me, as someone who is, I'm a super action, like I get pissed off, I want to write letters, I want to protest, so I understand protesting at its heart, because it makes you feel like you're doing something when you feel helpless, which is one
Yeah.
of the most frustrating things ever. But
Yeah.
when I had my first call where I realized that I was innately helpless, there's nothing I can do. I can't swoop in with a cape and pull this woman out and take her to safety and fix her life with a magic wand. That was when Robert Gibson taught me a really important lesson about, it's not my job to save people. It's not my job to convince people that they're wrong or that they need to be re-educated. I can only get someone one step closer. And if I can get someone one step closer, then that's a job well done. And the phones will continue ringing long
Right.
after I'm gone. People will
Right.
always need help. There will always be chaos in our society, but like working on getting people one step closer.
That's real change.
Mm-hmm.
That's real progress. Thank you so much, Angie. I appreciate you are the living embodiment of intent plus vulnerability plus communication.
Don't make me cry.
All right, honey. I'll let you go. You know I love you.
Bye, guys.
Okay. Thank you for that. Again, if this is your first Chief Chat, by the way, I hope it's clear that this is a very special Chief Chat, because this is important. And normally we talk all about copywriting and marketing, and we review each other's copy. And again, I just think this is a time for us all to sit back and have a way to do something with all the emotion and all the feeling and all of the terror and some of the inspiring things we've seen and find and just help each other a little bit process some of this. So that's what we're doing today. And I hope it's helpful in some way to you. Shaba, who is in RFL, a man who's really won my respect for his work ethic, his smarts. No idea what you plan to contribute right now, Shaba, but I'm happy to see you, my brother.
Happy to see you too. Can you hear me and see me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this was really unexpected. I didn't really plan on contributing anything today, but I actually wanted to share this, the thing that I want to share right now, because I think it's important. And I tried to quickly gather my thoughts, but I hope it will be good enough. I trust
it's
that
cool if it's clunky, brother.
Okay, so I want to talk about my personal experience with discrimination in general and with oppression, because I'm Hungarian, but I was born in Romania, in Transylvania. And there's a 100-year beef between Romania and Hungary. And this goes back to the First World War and a lot of historical things. But the thing is that I was discriminated against all my life while I was living in Romania, like for 25 years. I moved to Hungary 5 years ago. And compound this with also half a century of communism, because this is Eastern Europe. And like, I'm sure everybody knows a lot of things about communism. I really encourage people to read the Gulag Archipelago, a series of books about the Gulag system and everything. Now, obviously, I was born in '88, so I'm 32 years old now. And I haven't really lived in it personally, but my parents did, my grandparents did. And the thing that I noticed about oppression and discrimination in general is that it's a multi-generational thing, and it scars people for generations. And and I get it. It was adaptive for my parents, for my grandparents, to just shut up, stay silent, because otherwise the secret police will take you. But the problem is that the effect still lasts to this day. Like, all throughout my life, I've heard that, Csaba, don't try to be special. Don't try to be individualistic. Don't try to do anything because people will notice and you will get in trouble. And this, I noticed on myself as well, and a lot of friends, and my girlfriend is a psychologist, and she has clients from Transylvania, Romania as well, Hungarians who are still living there. It has a big effect on confidence, on alcoholism, on tendency to take risks. And this is how it relates to my journey as a copywriter, because I started this 4 years ago, and every single person from my extended family was saying, are you crazy? What are you doing? Like, you have a job. I was working at IBM at the time, but it was so boring and everything, just like administrative work. And the whole narrative was that don't take risks because you will get in trouble. And this was the effect of oppression and discrimination, because people like lived under communism, and this like ethnical type of discrimination for so long, it just became the norm. And I was a black sheep, a rebel for this, for reading so much. Like, I was like almost discriminated by my family for reading too much, for like studying English, because being interested in English since I was like 5 years old. And I wanted to watch every single movie in English, every game in English. I just liked it. And, you know, my family still doesn't really speak English, and it hurts so much to, like, they cannot read my stuff. Like, I want to share them, my success stories or something. And it hurts to my core that I cannot really share it with them. Yeah, they know that, oh yeah, you're doing fine, like, good boy and everything, but it's a bad feeling. And I blame communism for, but no, I don't want to make this so political and everything, but I guess the takeaway is that oppression and keeping silent has multi-generational effects, and this is a slippery slope. So if a nation like gets on this slope, just like with good copy, you know, it flows. And if it starts, it's very hard to stop. So my message, I think, is that it's really worth it to speak up and to voice the concerns while people still can, because eventually it just gets rugged under the like how do you call it?
Swept
Under the rug,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And I feel I'm so emotional just by talking about it.
I know. Yeah, I feel you, brother. And I appreciate you're being vulnerable right now, and you're being articulate. What you're saying is important.
And the most important thing for us copywriters is that who knows how many people, like in Eastern Europe or every single part of the world, doesn't, like brilliant minds who could be the next John Colton, let's say, don't really speak up, don't share their knowledge with the world because they're afraid, they're anxious, they're living in this dynamic of like, no, it's risky to just do anything special because I will get killed or imprisoned or anything.
Yeah. So if you have the voice and you have the freedom to use it, it's an obligation in a lot of ways.
Yes.
If your intention is to help the oppressed be less oppressed, or not want future oppressions to happen in your country. So many of our freedom of speech is being challenged right now, right?
Yes.
It's on full display, the fact that we have this privilege to go out into the streets, and sure, people are getting their heads clobbered in and terrible things are happening, but at least there's not a clear written law preventing that like there is other places. But that is being threatened, and it's something we need to be aware of. Thank you, Shaba, man. That was really powerful.
Thank you for hearing me out. I never thought that I would join a coaching program or any other community, like business-related community, that I would share these things. But thank you. This really shows how Copy Chief is special.
Thank you, man. I'm glad you feel safe doing it here. It's embraced.
Definitely. Cheers.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Great guy. Whew. Okay, so we do have a. I feel obligated. I'm gonna be Papa Kev and make everything feel okay for a minute. I have to be okay with this being so heavy, and I hope this is useful to you guys. It's my comic instincts. I'm aware of the audience, right? But it's so easy to hang up if you're not feeling this one. So it's okay. The people that are here are the people that want to be here, and I hope this is useful to you. I do want to answer. This is interesting. Claudio asked a really interesting question. What's the best approach to work in a multicultural agency? Claudio, I'm just interested in more context around what you mean by that, because on its face, I don't know the answer. I imagine okay, you want to come on? Cool. Yeah. Hey, Claudio, how are you? Just gonna unmute you there. Can you unmute?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Hi there. Hi, everybody.
Hi. Good to meet you. Where are you right now? Where's home?
I'm in Mexico City.
Great.
And the trouble here is that after 15 years to be a freelancer doing creativity and design, the economics get crazy here in Mexico because of the coronavirus and because of our government. And after 15 years working alone, I decide to get employed, and I will start in Monday in this place with a multicultural working. Like we have people in Poland and we have people in USA, and we will be here in Mexico trying to make a new group. And
So this is a physical. You have a physical office, so everybody lives there locally.
Yeah, everybody's going to be in their places, and we are going to work together in these standards now that are digital. I mean, and if you have any advice to work with these differences and with these challenges.
So just to be clear, you're asking how can you create a good working environment for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think this polarization, I don't know, is that the word, between in each country it's getting worse, and And I don't know if you have any advice for this.
Well, I could maybe give. I'm sure there's better resources than me on this. To be
Sure.
fair and honest, that I know I'm sure this is an issue that's been covered by some experts. That you know, and so I don't want to even pretend to guess what the best advice is. I will say this: if we just keep with the theme a little bit of intent plus vulnerability and communication, I can imagine if there was even something as simple as a happy hour or a time for everybody to get together casually and just talk and get to know each other and realize how much you have in common.
Okay.
As opposed, if this one of the situations you're dealing with is that your differences are on display and maybe causing conflict just because you have different ideals about projects or different ways of working. And I think rather than try to create a bunch of little spaces where like-minded people can sort of exist individually, but still share a space, would like, how many spaces can you create? You know what I mean? It would be like this strange little eggshell atmosphere, as opposed to how beautiful would it be if everybody just found a way, even for an hour a week, to be together and get to know each other beyond the work and form friendships, or at least have insight and understanding to how each other think and what they're maybe, you know, being parents alone. There's so certainly you deal with similar issues if you have, you know, offspring, right?
I'm sure.
So it could be the simplest thing sometimes. But again, I think if I don't know what that actually looks like or what best practices are on how to create that. But again, if you start with that intention and maybe take the lead on proposing, and you don't even have to make it like a big thing, like, hey, unless there's like super major conflict in there that needs to be dealt with. But if it's just something that you're conscious of could be improved, maybe just take the lead and say, hey, I'm going down the street and I'm going to, you know, secure like the back room of this tavern or whatever, and anybody wants to join me, I'm going to be there from 6 to 7 Friday, and I'd love to just hang out and get to know you better and just see who shows up and how much they might appreciate that. I don't know, it could be that simple, right?
Thank you for the advice. Wish me lucky.
Is that helpful? Yeah, I'd love to hear how it works. Tell me, please.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, man.
Thanks so much.
Good luck.
Nice
My
to meet
pleasure.
you.
You too, man. You too. Great to meet you. Yeah, I think sometimes, man, especially when it comes to like political things, and maybe that's part of why it's so hard for us to know exactly, okay, sure, I want to donate some money. Where do I begin and end my research into a group? Because I guarantee if you post on, you know, Facebook or somewhere that you donated to a group, you will hear from a lot of people telling you you made a mistake, or there's things you don't know, or things they believe about it, right? And so if you only make it official on how you go about connecting with people, then it is very difficult to maneuver all that information and context. But if you make it nothing but human, if you give from your heart because you hope that your $20, your $100 helps George Floyd's daughter live a better life than she would have, that's the only intention you need, you know? So whatever it is, just make it human. Okay. Well, here we are at the top of the hour, man. That was cool. And I would love to go on, but I do want to respect the time. And if anybody had a question that we didn't get to, or you need help with, and you're not a member, if you're a member of Copy Chief, please post it in there and ask about it, or reach out to your ambassador, like Angie or Alex or Lindsay or Bronco or Jimmy or Amanda or Carolyn. These are some of the best people in the world that I know, not just in this business, and they will be more than happy to help you. If you aren't a member of Copy Chief, you feel free to post it on our page, our Facebook page, and we will do our best to help you. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to be vulnerable, for allowing this conversation to happen. It's nothing we're going to solve in an hour, but it really, really touches my heart to know that you guys are with me and wanting to do something. And let's have the right intention. Let's be vulnerable and let's communicate. All right. Love you guys. Thank you. Have a great weekend.